Everybody loves a good ham radio handheld. Even those that spend the predominant amount of their time on HF still find themselves with one or two of these things. And there's so many options now, from the very cheap to the top of the line, that many people look around and go, what should I look at? Well, today I'm going to try and give you my top ham radio handhelds that I feel have a good balance in cost, feature set, and performance. So let's take a look. If you've been following my channel, in 2022, I started doing something a little bit different. I started going to the park and actually taking the radios with me and transmitting back to my home station, about a mile away as the crow flies. That allowed me to amass a decent list of ham radio handhelds and antennas, and they're ranked based off of their signal to noise ratio, the performance of the transmitted power back to my home station. Well, this is not lab grade testing. It's definitely shown us some things that I found really interesting from a practical point of view. One of the things that I think is most important in a handheld is not necessarily the transmitted power output, but the quality of the audio going out of it, e.g. what your friend hears on the other end on the other radio.
Kilo India 6 November Alpha Zulu testing the Baofeng GT5R on 2 meters, high power,
and what you hear coming out of the radio. So today's video is going to be me taking all of that into consideration and telling you what I feel are the best ham radio handhelds at the multi-price range level. The cheapies basically topping out at $200, everything from $200 to $400, and then the sky's the limit with the high-end stuff. Starting out with the cheap stuff, I went to the field and we tested sub $100 radios, and there's actually a couple more that I have practical use with that I have carried and have really enjoyed. For me, it comes down to 3 or 4 of them that I really like. The first being the Yaesu FT4X.
Kilo India 6 November Alpha Zulu testing the Yaesu FT4X high power on 2 meters.
This one performed okay in my signal to noise ratio testing. The audio quality is fine. It has filtering in it that meet the FCC standard requirements, so we don't believe it creates spurious interference, and it's basically the same type of radio as a Baofeng. The cost, way more expensive than a Baofeng, and I feel the quality is also a bit higher in the case and some of the features. This lacks a dual channel, AB channel type experience that you would get on a Baofeng. Some people can't get past that point, so I put it down kind of at the bottom of the list on the cheapest ham radios you can pick up. It would be hard for me to make a video about a handheld and not mention a Baofeng. Does it deserve to be on the best of videos? Maybe not, but hear me out on this one. This is a GT5R. This Baofeng's claim to fame, it's just like all other Baofengs you've ever experienced before, but this one is supposed to be FCC compliant with regards to spurious emissions. A spurious emission in the form of a transmitting radio is where you could be on a primary operating frequency, the one that you read on the screen and when you PTT you're transmitting on. With a radio that has poor harmonic suppression, when you key up, you'll be transmitting in harmonics of that fundamental frequency. The FCC requires that we have to be under a certain level of dB power output for all the harmonics of a radio. Baofengs generally do pretty bad at these tests and is often one of the reasons people don't like Baofengs. The GT5R sold by Radioddity is supposed to be compliant to the FCC harmonics requirements. Mine is. I can't account for every one of them, and who knows what the QA is like for some of these factories. I can't really comment on that, but at the same price of a Baofeng, it's probably the best way to go. So GT5R makes the list because you kind of have to have a Baofeng on there. Links for radios will be in the description. Some of them are affiliate codes. I will post when it's an affiliate link if there is one, so thank you. At the sub $100 mark though, my favorite was this simple Alinco. The Alinco DJ VX50 I felt had slightly better audio than the FT4X.
Kilo India 6 November Alpha Zulu testing the Alinco DJ VX50 2 meters high power.
It is a bit of a larger radio, but in general I thought that it performed better in regards to transmit audio, received audio, and signal-to-noise ratio in my sub-$100 radio testing. Now, there are two radios that are in the sub-$200 category that I haven't taken to the park yet. One of them I actually gave away on my channel. I did carry it for a long time, and I tested it in a different way on a live stream, and that's the Wouxun KG-UV9D Mate, the orange radio, the really high-vis, hard-to-lose KG-UV9D Mate. I generally like that radio a lot. I don't have the signal-to-noise ratio testing that I have done with other type of videos, so I can't say where it lines up on the list, but I enjoyed the audio quality, the user control, and the power output when we tested it live on stream. The next radio that I haven't taken to the park yet, but don't worry, I will, is my first radio, or, you know, that same SKU, the Yaesu FT60. The FT60 is still available on the market. It's been around for quite a while. It is a super heterodyne radio. This is where we start to make a transition into super heterodyne, by the way. I'll explain that as we go here. This is going to have a way better receiver than all the cheap radios that we talked about before. It won't be susceptible to what this Baofeng is doing in the background, which is a desense, or somewhat of a potentially an intermod situation that it's having, where it is having a bit of an overload of the receiver of the radio by stronger adjacent signals that are off frequency, like a loud FM station in some cases, or something over there, likely a laptop charger, is screwing up with it. If I put my Yaesu over here, no problem. So the front end of that radio, much better. This is still available for about $160. You can get this at Ham Radio Outlet or wherever you like to pick up ham radios. They're available online. You could probably get one used for very little money. And it still makes a perfect radio. It was my first radio. I'd still recommend it for first timers. It is simple, sure, but it's high quality and it sounds really good too. All right, the $200 to $400 price range. I really only have one pick here. This radio is simply one of the best handhelds you can get. I am so happy I got this radio. It is pretty much gone with me everywhere since I got it. It is my daily radio. It is also kind of like my have a little bag bug out radio. Another Yaesu coming in hot. I think a lot of you probably already know what it is. It is the Yaesu VX6. This is the first of the submersible radios that we're going to talk about. It is incredibly small, and it is tri-banded. The body of the radio is metal, literally feels like a brick. It has a number of features like submersible, tri-band. Those are kind of like the big ones that stand out to me. It is $230 to $240. The accessories are not that expensive, although you kind of are locked in when you get accessories for this. There aren't a lot of radios on the Yaesu line that still take these batteries that are available. I have a feeling that this radio will not be around much longer. That's just a hunch of mine. It's already kind of getting a little old. So is the FT60, but I feel like this one has a longer lineage and probably more staying power. I don't know how expensive this radio is to make, but I feel at $230 something for a radio this size and being tri-band, it's considerable in the cost to value relationship. If you are looking to upgrade from a cheap radio like a Baofeng, I think personally you should save your pennies and get this radio. The VX6 is a fantastic radio. You get a couple of replacement batteries for this, get yourself a drop-in charger, get yourself that mic that actually can screw in, and so you have a waterproof connection. It is a really nice radio. I've really liked it. It sounds okay.
Kilo India 6, November Alpha Zulu testing the Yaesu VX6. This is our benchmark test to compare against itself to see if there is some kind of change or something.
I'll give a caveat here. The only caveat that you could probably throw at this radio, speaker's kind of small, and it's also a submersible radio, so it's not going to be the best quality speaker. But as far as staying power goes in this area, the Yaesu FT60 and the VX6 are really good radios and really good buys. Something I should mention about the VX6 gives me strong, like, quirky vibes. It reminds me of the heyday of the late 90s and early 2000s when ham radios did all kinds of weird things. This thing has a CW like trainer built into it. It has that weird barometer that you can plug into it along with an altimeter, among some other little quirky things that it does. It's just a cool radio, and I think that at its size, you can just have it with you all the time, and it's good. Now, I have a confession to make. 2022 has proven to me that I just don't really like DMR. It's not something that I've really done at all in 2022. I've really focused in the areas of amateur radio and reviewing products and doing the different things I do on the Ham Radio Crash Course, specifically towards the things that I am the most passionate about. And frankly, just DMR isn't it. But I will give a nod to all of the AnyTone 878 radios. This is like the first gen or one of the first gens. They're all good DMR radios. They're DMR radios that can also do analog. I understand, and thank you for the correction, that even the latest rendition of this radio can actually do APRS, although it's kind of clunky or cumbersome to do, which APRS is probably one of my top features, as you well know. I'll give it the nod just because it deserves to be on the list. It is a good radio. If you are a DMR fan, this is a fine place to go. If you are not that interested in DMR, or you have not really experienced DMR, I feel like you might want to start out with analog, particularly if you're a new ham. The only way I'd tell people, and this is for everybody that wants to ask me this question, there's only one type of person that when they ask me, hey, should I get into DMR? I'm a new ham. Should I get into DMR as my first ham radio as a new ham? The only person I would say yes to is someone who lives in an area with very few people, that they need DMR or an internet-connected digital voice radio, either via a repeater system or a hotspot, to be able to make connection with people. Then I would say get yourself an AnyTone 878. Not a cheap radio, though. Probably one of the more expensive handheld DMR radios on the market. All right, here's where it gets difficult. The above $400 price range. I have 3 radios. I'll just get the one out of the way. The Kenwood D74 is unobtainium. I picked this up late in 2022. I know it's not even available. It's $800 on eBay. I keep repeating that. Don't go buy this radio at $800. It's not worth that price. If you can get closer to $500 and you have the money to spend, it's worth it for one type of person. Those who want to use that TNC capability into a laptop. There's already radios that do D-Star. There's already radios that do APRS for cheaper than this thing at this time. It's also kind of a hog on the battery, and to be frank, it's just a brick. It's literally just a rectangle brick. It doesn't give me a lot of love when I look at it. The buttons are small, the bezel's big. It sounds okay, although the speaker is kind of small. Again, it depends on your use case. I love the radio. It could be my most favorite radio of the year, but it's just not worth the price. So just caveat, I know you guys have seen me make some content with this radio, and I do truly like it, but I don't think it's worth the $800, and I certainly didn't pay that for this. Next radio, another Yaesu. The FT5DR has to be on this list. It is the radio I carry when I go outdoors, and I'm potentially in a situation where I am going to be off the cell phone grid, and I'm going to need to use something like APRS so that I can keep my friends and family notified of where I'm going and how I'm doing. This isn't a replacement for a satellite device like a Spot or a Garmin InReach or anything like that, but as far as ham radio goes, it's one of the better ways you can stay connected when you are off grid. Its size is right. It is an upgrade to the FT3DR, which, by the way, for anybody that is curious, if you can get an FT3DR cheap, just get an FT3DR. If you can get an FT2DR cheap, get an FT2DR. They're very similar radios. The batteries and the accessories are all interchangeable within the FT line, all the way back to the FT1. When you got to use APRS in the field, this is the radio I would take if it's simply about beaconing your location and very light messaging. The on-screen controls are kind of a pain, but this is one of only a few radios that has fully functioning APRS that I would actually depend on in a situation where I might need it, or just for fun. Now, last but not least is the Icom ID-52. The Icom ID-52 is the radio I take with me when I'm driving somewhere, or I'm traveling, not necessarily to go backpacking, like just, go into the San Gabriel Hills local to my home or anything like that, but I'm actually getting on a plane, going to a ham fest, going on vacation. This is the radio I take. If I'm driving far from my home, like over an hour, 2 hours, whatever, this is the radio I want with me. And the reason for that is really simple. There's very little controls on this radio. There's no keypad, right? And there's no touch screen, which means, well, how do you control the thing? What do you do? Well, when it comes right down to it, easiest thing about this radio is the memory card solution for loading repeaters on it. You go to D-Star Info, link is in the description. You type in your location and basically how many repeaters you want that are D-Star or analog only repeaters. You load it on your compact flash card, put it into this radio, and load off the CF card. That's all you have to do, and you can create a copy of repeaters for whichever geographic area you're going into. So I have one for Orlando, Huntsville, Dayton. All the places I go for Hamfest are loaded on this. Everywhere I've gone on vacation, I put on my little memory card, which is like a 32 gig or something like that. And then when I'm on the plane or when I get to wherever I'm going, I just change over to that repeater set and start scanning. The GPS allows you to scan geographically wherever you're at and point you at the right repeater to listen to at any one moment. You can find the nearest repeater to you, whether it's D-Star or analog, and you can get right into talking, if that's what you're all about. Now, on the pantheon of complexity, programming a Yaesu System Fusion and D-Star repeater is very low. DMR's complexity of programming is much higher for its code plug nature. Once done, though, the DMR radio is kind of like locked in stone. Yes, some are front panel programmable. You can use the keypad or whatnot. The Yaesu System Fusion and D-Stars, however, are easier to program just kind of on the fly. From my point of view, this is my subjective opinion here. And I've had plenty of times where I programmed repeaters on either the ID-52 or the FT5DR, and they've both been just completely fine. Now, as far as a radio being a radio, this radio has, I feel, the best transmit audio and the best transmit receive out of the speaker. During my testing, I found that this radio was superb in that sense in comparison to the competition. This did not beat the Yaesu in signal-to-noise ratio, but I feel that that is not as important as the transmitted audio and the quality of the receive audio out of its speaker. That's why I give this radio the nod. On my everyday use when I'm in and around town, tooling around, driving somewhere, or in travel. Putting a backpack on, I'm taking the FT5, possibly the Kenwood, and then my beautiful Icom probably can stay in the shack or stay in the car. Don't believe me? Here's an audio comparison between the Icom ID-52 and the Yaesu FT5DR.
Kilo India 6, November Alpha Zulu, stock mic gain, Kilo India 6, November Alpha Zulu. This is the Yaesu FT5DR testing high power, Kilo India 6, November Alpha Zulu.
Across the Southern California waters, at East Santa Barbara, Louis, winds were west at 40 knots. At Los Angeles Civic Center, it was sunny with a temperature of 68.
I'd like to wrap up this video by having a frank discussion with everybody in the room that thinks that the Baofeng is the end-all be-all of radios, or the inexpensive radios for that matter. There's a couple of issues that I have with that. Not that you're wrong. If you're happy with your Baofeng, be happy with your Baofeng. I just hope that you will consider the following points. 1. The quality of material that go into a Baofeng and a less expensive radio are not going to be close to that of, say, the VX6, for instance, right? The audio on the receive side is not going to be as good, and how you sound on the other side is also not going to be that good. Here's a comparison of a Baofeng versus the Yaesu VX6 and the Icom ID-52.
Kilo India 6, November Alpha Zulu, testing a Amazon Baofeng UV5R on 2 meters. Kilo India 6, November Alpha Zulu, transmitting on the Yaesu VX6 at high power on 2 meters. Kilo India 6, November Alpha Zulu. Kilo India 6, November Alpha Zulu, testing the Icom ID-52. This is at high power, Kilo India 6, November Alpha Zulu.
Kilo India 6, November Alpha Zulu, test.
All right, your simple bog standard UV5R.
Kilo India And east Santa Barbara Channel buoy. Winds were west at 14 knots.
Further, the Baofeng behind me is still doing its little interference dance that it has going on. Cheap radios that are called direct conversion radios are going to be overloaded very easily. Overloaded by an adjacent signal of some kind, which will actually deafen the receiver. It will make the receiver not function. You won't be able to pick up that repeater you're listening to or that person that you're trying to make a contact with on simplex. You generally need to step up to a more expensive radio that has appropriate filtering, or go all the way into what is called a super heterodyne radio. So for those of you that absolutely want to have the best reception in your handheld and try to get the longest distances, you basically should start your journey no less than the Yaesu VX6 or anything that is a super heterodyne receiver, and then start going up from there. You shouldn't consider the Baofengs, you shouldn't consider these sub $100 radios at all. Now, for everybody that's going to ask, what about Motorola? Well, when Motorola makes an amateur radio, I will definitely review it. I'm not that hot on the idea of having to go get a Motorola radio, figure out how to get it programmed, this steep learning curve that is Motorola, and then to have something that's basically a DMR radio. I kind of already said I'm not a big fan of DMR, right? So I know there's also P25. I get all of that. Those are less desirable things to me. But I am keeping an eye out for a Motorola radio, and I do appreciate your feedback on maybe where I should look. Maybe there are little tips or tricks you can tell me that would make my introduction into Motorola that much easier, and then I'll share it with all of you. What do you think of my list here? I think it's based on my practical testing that I went through, my personal opinion based off of the look and feel of the radios, and just frankly what I like and don't like. If you find that I don't speak the same language in regards to aesthetics, that's okay. Hey, at least now you know. Leave your comments below. I would love to hear it, and I'm posting a link here for you to go check out another video that I think will really work with what you're looking to see in amateur radio. I'm Josh KI6NAZ. I'll talk to you later. 73.